A couple of days ago, this super exciting but rather nondescript package just showed up on my doorstep, and I'm pleased to tell you this is the hotly awaited new L2 fully wireless gravel group set, which I purchased with my own money straight from AliExpress. And yeah, I am super excited to give this thing a go, seeing as we've been waiting a very long time to get our hands on this over in the UK. So despite this turning up on many trade shows over the past few years, and with photos appearing on their websites, you just haven't seemed to be able to buy this anywhere outside of China over the past few years. And I've really wanted to get my hands on a set, especially seeing as their current gravel group set that you could buy was really out of date using their old generation shifters, and they even had to redesign the charging port on the rear mech because the old one was causing so many bad water ingress issues, and it was a right bodge to fix it. They changed it so you were plugging directly into the battery in order to charge it. But with this new version, all of them problems should be a thing of the past. We're going for direct built-in batteries in the rear mech, which means no wires running through your frame, just your hydraulic brake lines and the rear mech connecting direct to your shifters, a la SRAM style shifting. So yeah, let's crack the box open and see what we're working with this group set. In China, I'm sure there is a proper retail packaging of this group set. However, as with a lot of things when you buy them on AliExpress, they repackage them into just simple bubble wrap in order to save on shipping fees. So we've got a load of components, each individually nicely packaged in bubble wrap. Starting off, we've got brake calipers, shifters, a bit of hardware and chargers, another shifter, another brake hose and caliper, and the rear mech itself. This is a 1x group set, so we only have a rear mech here. I've got all the components laid out on the desk here, and as you can see, L2 have clearly reverted to their old style of gold aesthetics and accents on the shifters and mech, like with the earlier generations of ERX. But don't be mistaken, these are the latest style of third generation shifters, and they haven't just shipped me an old version by mistake. So on to what's changed versus the old version. Firstly, you will notice they have, and this isn't just on this version, I think this is across their range, they have finally updated their brake caliper design to use a proper flat mount standard, which I am super happy to see, as them old calipers they used to use did not fit very well on a lot of frames, especially up front, and they just looked a bit ugly. Whereas now we're using a standard 2-bolt spacing like you would get with any other hydraulic flat mount calipers, both at the front and rear, which means you're using standard Shimano style adapter plates. This one for the front and this one for the rear if you are running a 160. Also in the little bags of hardware, you do get barbs, olives, and all the mounting screws you need, along with a compression nut to get this set up. One thing that's really nice to see is the charging port, and that is proper USB-C, which means no more carrying proprietary chargers with you if you're out on EGR. And then the star of the show is this new redesigned rear mech. It is quite a similar design to some of their other L2 rear mechs, and it uses their standard clutched cage, which has a pretty high tension but not the most powerful clutch I've ever felt, and it's pretty linear in its actuation. Looking towards the back of the unit now, it is all one self-contained unit, and I am assuming this is your battery pack here. However, the battery pack is part of the mech and it shouldn't really be removed. This isn't designed to be taken off and charged. Instead, under this little plastic flap, you have a USB-C port. Then the rest of the mech's pretty standard affair. Limit screws, nice and easily accessible, and a B tension bolt right here, which is going to adjust your B tension. In terms of pulleys, it's nothing too fancy, and it's a standard, pretty heavy feeling metal cage, but the pulleys do spin nice and freely. However, these are clearly not ceramic bearings. But in terms of the overall fit and finish of this mech, it definitely, if you can see there, isn't the most premium thing I've ever felt, and it definitely feels a bit of a step down when you compare it to 3rd gen ERX, so the road version of this group set. Things like this charging port flap are just a bit hard to get to work and stuff. It just, honestly, it feels rather cheap. And then onto the shifters. These are almost identical to my road shifters. However, there's one key difference, and that is the buttons. You'll notice on the left-hand shifter, due to this being 1x, it's almost like they've just not mounted the buttons into the shifter. And I think quite literally, as you can see, the mounting bolts are still there for it along with the cutout. So that is really a bit of a cost-saving measure going on. And you can feel there are some kind of sharp edges around where the buttons would mount, which I'm hoping is something that maybe I'm just unlucky and got, because it just, again, feels quite cheap. Now, L2 aren't alone in doing this. I know Shimano have done the same thing with their 105 level GRX group set, but yeah, the whole thing feels like a bit of a cost-cutting measure, despite having the nice new wireless unit. The only thing on this group set that doesn't feel like they've cheaped out is these brakes. They do feel a big step up, and they are really quite lightweight, as well as being monoblock calipers, which is always something nice to see. I'm pretty certain these hoses are your sort of standard Shimano style hose. I'll have to check whether they are BH90 or BH59 standard. And they have a little loop pre-installed to allow you to feed a gear cable through and fish these through your frame dead easy. But in terms of shifter ergonomics, they are just as good as always, and the shifters themselves do feel pretty premium without any unnecessary rattling going on. And unlike with wheel top, the hood rubbers always are nicely attached on L2 group sets. So now it's time to throw this stuff on the scales. Starting with the brakes. So the front brake, you're looking at 124.5 grams, and the rear brake, you're looking at 139.3 grams. Just bear in mind, you will need some hardware on top of that. Onto the shifters next. The left hand, which will be lighter because it's got none of the electronics in it, 207 grams compared to the right hand, 237 grams. So clearly these shifter mechanisms take up 30 grams. And together 444 grams. Then finally the rear mech is 395 grams. So clearly not the lightest group set in the world. But despite saying it feels a bit heavy, if I grab a complete SRAM E1 group set, you are looking at 1,217.8 grams. Remembering this does not include a battery for the rear mech, compared to L2, which is just 1,102.6 grams. So it is a good 100 grams lighter than the far more expensive SRAM E1. However, that SRAM stuff does feel a lot more premium in hand. After seeing that SRAM rival weight, I did want to check, actually, how does it compare to SRAM Red? And I looked at the weights for SRAM Red, and actually, I think this L2 might be lighter than SRAM Red, at least based off the photos of people weighing SRAM Red E1 Explorer online. But you just got to remember that with SRAM, you don't need a rear mech hanger, so maybe that would make the difference. So I think now it's time we throw this L2 EGR group set on a gravel bike and see just how well it rides. And the bike plane test subject for my new EGR group set is my old On1 Free Ranger in its full cream egg colour scheme. I was going to put my old GR9 group set on it, but it's been a while since this bike's had any prime time content. So I think it's only fair we restore it to former glory with this EGR group set. So where to start then? I think I'm going to start by throwing the shifters and mechs on, and then I'll get the brakes hosed up. Being a true wireless group set though, it should be a pretty easy install. There we go. Shifters are on the bike, all hosed up, brakes are working. And these new L2 calipers are looking so much cleaner than the old ones they used to have. I think it's time to get the chain and wheels on and see how it's looking all together. Wow, well that was easy to get them working. No rubbing or anything, instantly. And really good lever feel straight out of the box without any adjustment. Perfect. That's interesting. Unlike with ERX, you can actually go up to 13 speed in the app. That's something I'm going to have to try at some point. And yeah, the only thing I need to do now is actually get this thing out and ride it. I'm so excited, honestly. Right, so the L2 EGR has been on my bike for around a week now, and I've got some thoughts on it. Now, first things first, as you might be able to hear in my voice, I've been pretty unwell since installing this group set, so I haven't had a chance to get tons and tons of riding in on it. But to be honest with you, even after my first ride on it, I think my impressions were pretty set. So I'm going to go through all the good and quite a bit of the bad about this group set. So the first thing I've had an issue with, which kind of is my fault for not reading the spec page properly really, is the cassette compatibility. And now, I hadn't read it properly, but turns out this group set is only compatible with a 46 tooth max sprocket. And now currently on here, this is a 50 tooth. And I was hoping to be able to get it to work, but when you're trying to change into that 50, it's just so laboured. And to be honest with you, it's not compatible. No matter how much tweaking of the B limit, I just don't think this is a good setup. I don't unfortunately own anything around a 46. I have a 40 spare in 11 speed, which I could have thrown on, but then I would have had to change wheels because that's not XD. So yeah, I managed to get it working. It was working fine in the bottom 11 gears, but just shifting up into that 50 wasn't going to happen. And yes, it's not a chain length issue because if my chain was any longer, it would be too slack in the 10 tooth. So I think the cage just is not long enough to accommodate a 50 on this one, which considering how easy it is to get rear mechs that can do 50s now, yeah, not great. And then the next thing I want to discuss is that overall fit and finish from the start. And whilst I think the shifters still feel very high quality, I would have liked to see either they just leave the normal 2x-road shifters and you could have just shifting on both sides, or them redesign the blades so there's not just a weird cutout on them. I get it's a cost-saving measure, and yeah, this group set is rather cheap, as I'll get onto later. It just feels a bit clunky to me. And then the rear mech, I'm not overly confident in its build quality, and that charging port cover, pain to install, and I don't have the most faith in its water ingress protection, as well as all the plastics on the rear mech just look a bit scrappy and just not the highest quality in the world. So I think you get what you pay for here. In terms of the whole setup and electronic experience of the group set though, I have to say it was very positive. It's all done via the L2 app and it's super easy to configure, allowing you to manually tune every sprocket. That is a bit more effort than setting up something like Shimano Di2 that you just tune one and it'll automatically set all the rest up. I couldn't seem to get that to work in this L2 app, so I just ended up dialing in every sprocket, which is nice if you've got a bit of a cheapo Chinese cassette like I'm often running, where the spacing's not always absolutely bang on. So in that regard, really good. And I have to say the brakes, whilst I don't think I'm too sensitive to braking performance, to be honest with you, coming from someone who's rode rim brakes for years, yeah, they work, they stop me, they don't make horrific noises, so I'm pretty happy with them there. And they were super easy to set up, and I'm so glad they've moved away from that weird proprietary mounting system. What's better is they came pre-filled, which meant there was no need to bleed them on the first install. Yes, you might tell me it's recommended to bleed them even with pre-filled brakes, but I've found, especially with this, the performance to be just good enough straight out the box without any tinkering needed. If at some point they do start to lose a bit of their performance, then I'll get the bleed kit out, but yeah, I'm not getting messy hands covered in oil just to bleed something that doesn't need it. And on the brakes, they are mineral oil, which is so much easier than dealing with dot fluid. And to be honest with you, there's not too much more to talk about here. I mean, the fact it's a true wireless system meant it was so easy to install. The whole pairing process was super seamless. So yeah, I mean, I'm conflicted on this one. It's clearly a cheap group set. And if they badged it up as maybe like EGR7 or as one of their lower end sort of parts, I probably wouldn't be as critical, but the fact they're like branding this as their flagship group set when it clearly isn't flagship quality, yeah, leaves me with a bit of a sore taste. And when you compare it to the ERX that's on my road bike in the garage, that ERX, aside from the shifters that are the same as on here, is way higher quality when you look at the mechs. So I guess there's one last thing to mention, and that is the price for this thing. Now, obviously, prices on AliExpress can vary, especially for new products that haven't been out a while. The listing I bought it from looks like it probably cost you about 230 quid at the minute. However, it is showing out of stock. So the next best deal I found was listed at £345, but when you use some coupon codes, it takes the price down to just over £250. Now, whilst this video isn't sponsored at all, if you use my code, I will get a little bit of commission from it, and you'll save yourself an extra 35 quid. Bringing the cost of this group set down to about £250. Now, at that price, I can start to excuse a few of its flaws. However, if you can afford to spend just that bit more, I think the quality of my wheel top group set does feel a bit more premium. So you'll have to let me know in the comments below, what do you think about this group set, and what do you think of brands like L2 going to full wireless versus having a seat post mounted battery like on their older generations. I personally think for gravel, it's the way to go. I'm still not fully sold on road, but I have to say, from the perspective of a home mechanic, not having to run wires through your frame is a massive advantage. So I will be running this group set all summer on the Cream Egg bike, which is going to be what I'm going to be getting a lot of training miles in on. So I'll be back to you at the end of the summer once I've got a compatible cassette with a full review of just how this thing's holding up. Because yeah, throwing it on a bike and riding it around town for a week isn't really a proper review. So I need to get testing this thing properly. Later in the week, hill climb racing will be resuming and you'll be able to see the race that's set off this cold far worse. So make sure you get subscribed so you don't miss it, and I will see you all soon.